Do you know this?
Okay, thank you everybody for being here. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Trustees on December 23rd, 2013 to order. We have the roll, please.
Mike's on.
Trustee Clark?
Here.
Trustee Collum?
Here.
Trustee Davis-Fort?
Here.
Trustee Levison?
Present.
Trustee Rosner?
Here.
Trustee Schnall is absent. Village President Torpey?
Here.
Also present. Steve Rother, Village Council. Barry Lewis, Village Administrator. Adam Lerner, Deputy Village Administrator. And myself, Chanel Smith, Acting Village Clerk. Adequate notice of this meeting had been provided to the press in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and JSA 10:4-6. In addition, notice of this meeting was posted in Village Hall and on the village's website and has been filed in the office of the village clerk. Official action may be taken.
Thank you. We have one resolution to begin to go into executive session.
Resolution 2013-294, resolution authorizing an executive session at the December 23rd meeting of the Board of Trustees.
So the matters to be discussed in executive session this evening are PBA scheduling, which is a contract negotiation, volunteer applications, which is personnel, clerk vacancy, which is personnel, East Orange Water Commission litigation, and liquor license issues, which is attorney-client privilege. Do I have a motion?
A move.
Moved by Trustee Levison. Second. Seconded by Trustee Clark. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, we'll be back out here at 8 o'clock. Okay, thank you everybody for being here. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Trustees back to order. Could we have the roll, please?
Trustee Clark?
Here.
Trustee Collin?
Here.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Here.
Trustee Levison?
Present.
Trustee Rosner?
Here.
Trustee Schnall is absent. Village President Turpie?
Here.
Also in attendance, Barry Lewis, Village Administrator, Rother, Village Council, Adam Lerner, Deputy Village Administrator, and myself, Chanel Smith, Acting Village Clerk.
Thank you. Could everybody please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please stay standing for a moment of silence. Thank you. Hey, thanks for bearing with us as we got a little bit of a late start this evening. Try and move through the announcements quickly. Just one last reminder for anybody watching, our offices will be in 76 South Orange Ave for the next 2 years as we continue to renovate our historic Village Hall. All the phone numbers, everything else is the same, and we're on the 3rd floor. So that's right on the corner of South Orange Ave and Irvington Ave. We are looking for volunteers. We have a handful of openings on a number of different committees and boards, including some of our land use boards. If you're interested in volunteering, you can go to our website at southorange.org and find the volunteering section on the left-hand side, and you can just select which committee you're interested in volunteering with. If you have any questions about any of that, you can reach out to any of us, and we'd be more than happy to talk to you about what options are available and what opportunities there are to get involved with the village. A reminder that the Parking Authority is accepting parking permit renewals through January 7th. You can go in person to the Parking Authority offices, which are on the 2nd floor of Baird at 5 Mead Street, Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. And if you do it by mail, just make sure to complete the application and include all the documentation there. If you have a question, you can call the Parking Authority at 973-378-7715, extension 2037, or email nrodriguez@southorange.org. Just a reminder that should we see any more snow or ice this winter, that for commercial properties, for example downtown, you're required to clear the sidewalk in front of your property within 4 hours after the storm ends. And snow and ice in residential properties should be removed within 12 hours after the storm ends. So please make sure to do that. There's usually plenty of folks walking around offering to shovel. And a reminder, our holiday hours, we will be closed tomorrow and Wednesday, as well as Wednesday, January 1st for New Year's. So just a happy holidays from everybody here on the board and everybody in Village Hall. Hopefully everybody here gets a chance to relax and spend some downtime with their friends and family over this holiday season. So our first order of business tonight is to swear in one of our new police officers with the South Orange Police Department. Do we have the captain here? Want to start
we
the
do.
ceremony?
Officer Lombardi, I believe, I don't know where he is. He's here somewhere.
Here.
Chief Shalell sends his regrets. He was unable to be here. I know Chief Shalell was able to attend Officer Lombardi's graduation from the academy, as well as the other sort of formal official swearing in. And but he did want me to put on, on the record how pleased he is with Officer Lombardi, how much he looks forward. He did an outstanding job in the academy, and we're looking forward to bringing him on board. And we do have in the back, I think, Captain Heckel, Sergeant Young, some other representatives of the department are here. But I don't think they knew the chief wasn't going to be here, so they weren't prepared to speak. So
Okay, no problem.
We'll have Officer
Sir, if you'd like
Lombardi
to come up.
I don't know if he has anyone.
Raise your right hand. I, Richard Lombardi, do solemnly swear I will support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New Jersey, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same and to the governments established in the United States and in this state under the authority of the people. I do further solemnly swear that I will faithfully, impartially, and justly perform all the duties as a police officer in the Department of Public Safety, Police Force, for the Township of South Orange Village, according to the best of my ability, and that I will not use my office to grant preferential treatment, nor seek personal gain, favor, or advantage, not available to the public. So help me God. Congratulations. And I think I can speak on behalf of all the trustees. Welcome to our new officer, and very excited to have you here with the South Orange Police Department.
Jimmy should have told you that.
Congratulations again.
Welcome aboard.
Little do the trustees know they all have parking tickets waiting for them outside. So the next part of our meeting is the public comment period. So we do have a sign-up list here for folks with public comments. The one thing, and I'll defer to what the trustees want to do here, one of the things that I was going to ask the board what they want to do tonight, just because I see a lot of people here have comments about the charter revisions, is we do have a trustee absent tonight who I know is interested in being here to participate in this vote. So I was going to ask the board if we want to table this to our next meeting to make sure that all the trustees can be here and vote. Obviously, people can still feel free to make all their comments, but if there was an interest in doing that, I wouldn't want people to go through, make all the comments, and then have the board table something that would seem a little off. So if people are interested in still holding the vote tonight, that's totally fine, obviously, but that was my thought going into the evening.
Why don't we get through the public comments, and then we can straw poll the board and see if it would even make a difference whether Steve's here or not, and then we'll know whether to take action. We can have that discussion after public comment.
Sure, that's fine. I just didn't want to run through everything and then end up tabling something that would seem a little rude, but we can definitely do that. So let's go through everyone here. The first name we have, and obviously if your name isn't on here, you can still speak just after we go through all the names here. Aaron Nierenborg? Just come up. You can come up to the microphone down here, and if you could just please state your name and address for the record. And just a reminder, if everyone could try and keep their comments to 3 minutes, please, so we can make sure to hear from everybody tonight.
No. The mic is down there.
Oh. Do we have the camera down there? Yes. Or is it only? Yeah. Okay.
My name is Aaron Nierenberg. I live at 289 Western Drive South in South Orange, and I'm here to comment on the parking ordinance affecting our street. I've lived in South Orange for 44 years and on Western Drive South for 28 years. And in all the 28 years, I've never noticed any problems with garbage trucks or any other large vehicles making their way around Western Drive, even when cars are parked on both sides of the street. Now, I'm sympathetic to the residents who have been experiencing problems with parking, and they should be granted some relief. But the overwhelming majority of us have not been experiencing any problems, certainly in the 28 years I've lived on the street. Furthermore, I've always believed that the village trustees should be about improving the quality of life for residents in South Orange, not making things more difficult for us. And that would indeed be the effect of this ordinance by prohibiting us from having people park in front of our house. So I would just ask that we leave status quo, because the overwhelming majority of people in the neighborhood are happy with things the way they are. And we've never had a problem with fire engines or anybody getting through the street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin? Okay. Berg.
I'm Martin Berg, B-E-A-R-G, 16 Village Green Court. I'm here to comment on what you wanted to table, the ordinance revising the charter. I'm here long enough to remember that Ronald Reagan only gave block grants to townships, and so we changed from a village, which we were from time immemorial, to a township of South Orange Village. And I don't have a problem going back now that it's irrelevant. What I do have a problem is we're a unique form of government here. You want to be under the Faulkner Act and be a township manager type form of government, then adopt a Faulkner Act. Changing the name to mayor is irrelevant, but giving stipends will increase our taxes. Nominally, you say, but that's the sliding scale that will open the door that was rejected 10 years ago when it was attempted to get the Board of Village Trustees an actual salary and benefits under the pension plan from the state. So I object to that stipend. If you want to change names, I could care less.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I apologize. I can't read the next name at all, but it's Longview is the address.
John Burkett.
Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Hi, my name is John Perkert, 661 Longview. I'm here to speak on two matters. The first one is the renovation of Village Hall. I went to the new offices in the bank building that Village Hall is occupying, and I must say they were very professional. They were clean. I felt good about going in there. And I understand that the rent is $160,000 a year, which for housing something like 25 employees is maybe like $6,500 a year, versus renovating a Village Hall building, which currently is estimated at $7 million, and I doubt it's going to come in at that, which will cost $280,000 to build an office for each of those people. I think that's an outrageous expense that we really don't need to incur as taxpayers. We have never seen a full cost accounting of what this project is going to cost, and at $7 million already, I think that whole project needs to be revisited. The second issue I wanted to talk about was the charter. I am not in favor of changing titles or the stipend. I have not heard anyone talk about whether or not that stipend is in lieu of a reimbursement policy for expenses that each trustee incurs, or whether this is an addition to a reimbursement of expenses. And I think that ought to be clarified no matter which way you vote. Also, I would like to make note of the comments that were quoted by the village president in the newspaper as a rationale for the stipends. I found the comments to be offensive, ill-advised. The notion that this is about classism is simply outrageous. And I would hope that those people who decide to vote for this stipend, if there are any, would distance themselves publicly from those remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy Garber.
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Garber. I'm a resident of 299 Western Drive South. A few months ago, another neighbor of ours, Ron Regala, and I, both of whom opposed the change in the parking for Western Drive, north and south, went around to our neighbors and asked them what they thought. And the majority did not want the situation changed. And so we drafted a petition, which I think was electronically sent to the members of the Board of Trustees. But for the record, I'd like to read it here. And it's signed by 20 individuals, which are 13 of the households. And also informally, several other people said that they also oppose any changes to the current ability to park on both sides of the street. We are residents of Western Drive North and South. Some of us have lived here for more than 10, 20, or 30 years, while others of us have moved in more recently. We strongly wish to preserve the current parking rule that allows parking on both sides of the street. In our collective experience, we have seen the current rule work well, both in day-to-day situations and in emergencies. We oppose the proposed restriction, which would limit parking to one side of the street. We see this proposal and the inevitable no parking signs, parking violation fines as unnecessary, inconvenient, burdensome, expensive, and as to the signs, an eyesore. And just in my experience living there for 18 years, there have been a number of emergencies. There have been fire trucks on the street. There have been ambulances on the street, some very frequently for some neighbors that later moved away, including the Robinsons who had lost their son on 9/11. I forget which member of the couple was suffering from frequent medical emergencies. The ambulance was always able to get there. For other emergencies, fire trucks have always been able to get there. So I've personally experienced and seen that the street is wide enough. It works even when there's parking on both sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Ronald Regola.
I'm Ronald Rugala. I live at 302 Western Drive South. I've lived there for 30 years, and I share with Jeremy on his comments, the commenter before me. I don't understand why all of a sudden we have this problem. The only thing I can think of is maybe our fire truck is too wide, if that is a safety issue. I'm not sure. I haven't heard anything about anything here. Also, the way this thing has been notified, we have been notified, is somewhat of an obfuscation. We didn't receive this thing until day before yesterday. In addition, I'm not sure how many people received it on our street. You know, there are a lot of people. It wasn't distributed by mail, for one thing. I'm not sure it was somebody skulking around and tossing in the mailbox, which in addition I think is a violation of the postal laws, tossing his thing into our mailbox. So you might want to think about what you do. Maybe you can also explain better what sides have the parking, what sides don't have the parking. Is there any parking at all? I find this thing quite difficult to sort out. That's all I have. I'm thoroughly against any prohibition of parking or no parking.
Thank you. Michael Davis.
Yes, my name is Michael Davis. I reside at 380 Lenox Avenue in South Orange for the better part of 23, 24 years. I just primarily would like to thank the board for their service, and I think it's a wonderful thing that you do. I know some of you, and it's always been an honor, I think, to do that. I wish I could do it myself. I stand here, though, in opposition to the amendments to the charter. I'm not sure what the proper terminology is, but the stipend in particular, I don't find it necessary. I think there's no reason at all to raise even $1 worth of taxes these days. And I just wanted to, again, thank you, but hope that you would consider in your voting an opposition to this. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry again for the name, 520 Melrose.
My name is Maddie Gandel, and I'm speaking for myself and my husband, Bob Gandel. We've lived at 520 Melrose Place since 1971 and love South Orange, and I would like to repeat what the prior person spoke. It's a wonderful thing that you do for the town. However, I am in opposition to the charter changes. I have to be honest with you, I haven't been to a trustee meeting in many years. I was president of the South Orange League Women Voters in the 1970s and very active at that time. And I know that it's important for the town to know what's happening, for people to be informed. When you have such a change as this, when we never had salaries in 100 years, whatever number of years, and all of a sudden there's a proposal for change and for this magnitude, even though it seems to be a small amount, as someone said, it starts out small and it gets bigger and bigger, but why? What's the rationale? Can you let the residents of the town know why this came about? And when you have a charter change, I remember there was a charter change 10 or 15 years ago. I thought it had to be more publicized more. People in the town should know what's happening and not, I know it's televised and I know we're supposed to be more active, and I apologize for not being more informed, but I only heard about this a week ago, and I think you have a responsibility to those members of the community and to your elected office to keep the people informed, tell them why, and perhaps have a vote for it. This is a huge change, and I suggest you rethink this very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have Bob also from 520. Are you? Okay. William, 144 Milton.
William Graves, 144 Milton Place, South Orange. Part of the changes you are proposing, or that are proposed, are to change the elections, municipal elections, from the spring to November. I'm not sure of the rationale, whether it's a money-saving item or whether you simply want to increase the participation. But if you change the elections from spring to November, we'll be down on the very, very, very bottom of the ballot. The issues facing the trustees and the citizens of South Orange will be drowned out in the publicity and campaigning for governor, not for governor, but for president and Senate members of Congress. And so if it's just money saving, then I think you should reconsider. And if it's to increase participation, it seems to me that there are other ways to increase participation. Perhaps more publicity throughout the downtown portion of the village to the village elections would be a way to increase participation. Now, I saw the statistics for municipal elections, and quite frankly, in some ways, they're shocking. That only, in some instances, single digits of the voting population care enough to come out and decide who's going to be their governing council is very disturbing. But there are other ways to increase participation, and I think you should seriously reconsider your change of time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? Yeah, just please come forward and state your name and address.
My name is Gerard Andrews. I'm a resident of South Orange. I live at 363 Charlton Avenue. I've been a resident since 1976. I know some of the members on the board here. And I also would like to thank you folks for the amount of time that you put in. I know that there are hours that you have to serve on various committees, and it's a non-paid position. Having said that, I look at people here who I saw politicking very hard for this position. I remember when you ran for village president. I think you wanted to win, didn't you? And it was not a paid position. I open up the newspaper and I see that we are really excited about getting grants. And I think it's terrific. We're getting grants. There's like thousands of dollars of grants that have come in. And then we are in this building, which, as many of you know, I consider to be the albatross of South Orange. We were schnookered again into having the SOPAC Society that we were just going to lend them the money to, and they were going to pay us back. And this was a good thing, because somewhere, somebody that we paid to tell us how to run our town thought that we really needed a performing arts center. We are 45 minutes from Manhattan. If you want to go to Lincoln Center, if you want to go to Carnegie Hall, the list goes on. Broadway. You go into the movie theaters here, it's pretty lousy. You know, you have like one row at the end, you got to cross in front of everybody. But we own it. Not only do we own the in excess of $14 million that we've so far put into this, but I open up the newspaper and we are excited that we now own it. You think that's a great idea. You think it's a terrific idea. Well, I believe it's not a good idea. And of course, maybe somebody might say, well, it's too late now, we own it. Well, I do know this. In corporate America, if you do a good job, you get a raise. If you do a bad job, you get fired. We can't fire you until the next election. Whether it's in November or spring, I'm going to work very hard to get you out. And I do believe that you don't deserve a penny. You wanted the job, you got it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Arthur Young, 29 Church Street. Volunteerism is one of the first things that you mentioned at the beginning of this meeting. And we certainly need more volunteers in this town. I've been living here almost 10 years, and quite frankly, I didn't even know that there were opportunities to volunteer. So it's kind of a secret. But if the volunteers want to get paid, then the other people who are thinking about volunteering, I think that that's a negative for them too. Volunteering is something that is very important and we should do more of it. And I see around here, it looks like the only people that are here are people who are, excuse the word, older. There are a lot of young people who are in our town that aren't participating. Perhaps that's where we need to put our energy, into getting more participation so that we could get a lot more done. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hello, Board of Trustees. Michael Goldberg, Mayhew Drive in South Orange. I come here tonight to reiterate my opposition to Ordinance 2013-19 and the idea of providing compensation for members of the board. I expressed my opposition when this was first raised back in 2003, again in 2011, and again when we voted on it together as a board back in 2012, where I thought it was finally put to bed. I want to commend Trustee Collum and the other members of the Charter Review Committee for all the hard work that they did to identify numerous modifications to the Charter that are necessary to bring it in line with state statutes, cleaning up language, etc. However, at your last meeting, Trustee Rosner and Trustee Levison proposed a very reasonable solution to address those critical items while excluding the more controversial and unnecessary changes to your titles and your compensation. My opposition is based on 4 very simple and key points. Number 1, serving as a volunteer member of the Board of Trustees has been an honor and a privilege for almost 150 years, and which are both a big part of our culture and tradition. Number 2, providing compensation is simply not necessary. I can say firsthand that in my 6 years on the board, there were no mandatory expenses incurred. Cash compensation is not necessary, even more so now that you've recently adopted a travel reimbursement policy. Number 3, our taxes are already well beyond excessive, with the average family already paying $15,000 to $20,000 a year, and some paying upwards of $30,000 or even $40,000 a year every year in taxes. You need to find a way to reduce the budget, not increase it, especially on discretionary expenses like this that provide a benefit to 7 people in the entire town. Lastly, number 4, as some other folks had said, once you open the Pandora's box and provide compensation, even if it starts out as modest, it will increase over time. Alex Torpy's quote in last week's News Record that government is perpetuating a systematic classism is Exhibit A for how politicians will make excuses to provide themselves greater compensation over time in order to solve a problem that simply does not exist. Looking at the board, we should all be very proud that we have representation across age, religion, race, gender, neighborhood, and income as a microcosm of our entire town. There is no systematic classism, and to suggest such a thing trivializes real discrimination when it occurs. So with the split that I understand is on the board on this issue, rather than having a split vote and forever being accused of making such radical changes when people are out of town or busy for the holidays, I'd like to suggest that the most prudent thing to do would be to strike Ordinance 2013-19 and adopt instead 2013-25, which does not include the title and compensation changes. It can pass unanimously and put this controversy behind us once and for all. I thank you all for your time and wish you all the best for the holidays and the new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, at this time I'd like to close public comments. Oh, one more.
Good evening, Robert Chandros, West Montrose Avenue. I'm here to talk about a few things tonight. First of all, at the last meeting, I raised a number of questions about the arrangement with Zipcar. I got very unsatisfactory, misleading, and blatantly wrong answers. Since that meeting, I've seen the village attorney go out and say the parking authority can do whatever it wants. That is simply wrong. There is a state statute that governs what it can do, and it can't do whatever it wants. I have filed an Oprah request with the village clerk for documents concerning Zipcar. They don't have any. I have also filed an Oprah request with the parking authority for such documents. I'm waiting to see what kind of response I have. Zipcar simply does not have any legal right to have its vehicles parked in the parking lot. If you want to sign a contract with them and have a public debate of an ordinance, that's fine. But until then, they ought to remove those vehicles immediately. Otherwise, your attorney is doing you a very disservice, and you are doing a very big disservice to this community. And I really resent the way this has been cavalierly handled. Second thing I want to raise is the outbreak of late model luxury vehicles that have been stolen while left running in front of somebody's house or in their driveway. It would seem to me incumbent for this board to make some effort, and I don't know how you do it, to publicize this stuff. And maybe you embarrass people who that happens to. But there's simply no excuse for my paying tax dollars for the police department to go out and look for stolen cars that never had to be stolen in the first place. And I hope this, once and for all, is dealt with. Third thing I want to talk about is the issue of titles. I have heard throughout this discussion about charter reform, I'm the trustee or I'm the president of the Board of Trustees. Nobody knows what this is. You know, I can think back to John Francis, to Bert Spiota, to Roger Ross, and even to Bill Calabrese, which we all have opinions about. And I never heard one of them say nobody knew who I was. Fact is, the title doesn't make the man makes the title. More importantly, I was thinking that a year ago, there was a tragedy in Newtown, Connecticut. The spokesperson for that community was the first selectman. I never heard anybody in the press or anywhere say, what is a selectman? What is the first selectman? This whole issue about needing to be a mayor is utter nonsense. If you need to have a title to prove your worth, then you shouldn't have the title, the office that you hold. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Just, yep, come forward.
Bob Adler, 120 Ralston Avenue. I was going to wait until you discussed the tabled ordinance. Maybe I will, but the first thing I want to say is whatever else is going on, I really can't blame you guys for people leaving their cars running and having them stolen. But I blame you for everything else. So, about the charter change, I mean, I spoke against the compensation, whether you call it a stipend or anything else. I spoke against the compensation last month, and I'm still against it. I think it's fine to change the name back to Village of South Orange, provided that doesn't carry any baggage with it, that it doesn't change anything but the name. And similarly, I'm not against changing the titles to mayor and council person, provided it doesn't change anything, that the town will operate exactly the same way. It'll just have different titles. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? Okay, seeing as there are no more members of the public who wish to speak, I'd like to close public comments. Most of these, I think, will be able to be addressed in just a second when we discuss this tabled ordinances for second reading regarding the charter changes, and same when we get to the Western Drive ordinance. The only other comment that was brought up that really could be addressed at this point was about Zipcar. I think we provided all the satisfactory answers we have. If it's not satisfactory enough, we apologize. You could submit your questions in writing. We could try and do better, but there really isn't anything more to say than I think than what we've said. Moving on to our tabled ordinance for second reading.
Ordinance 2013-19, an ordinance approving a draft revised and restated charter for the Township of South Orange Village and authorizing the submission of the same to the New Jersey legislature for enactment into law.
Thank you. The last time we discussed this, we did spend a fair amount of time going over the pretty comprehensive history of public meetings, reviews, public documents that have been done and made available, and we've done our best effort to make sure everybody is aware of. There's quite a bit of information on our website at southorange.org that contains the information from the Charter Review Committee, which was a pretty thorough study from 2011. So I'm not sure how much folks want to go through the entire history again tonight.
There was a couple questions brought up, if I can address those.
Absolutely.
First, now is it on? Yeah. Okay. Regarding the question of when our elections take place, that was removed from consideration. It was one of the recommendations from the Charter Review to move from the May to the November elections and keep the nonpartisan form of government. It was an act through the legislature that allowed nonpartisan municipalities to make that change. So it was recommended by the Charter Review Committee, but the Board of Trustees agreed not to move forward with that recommendation. So it's not under consideration under each of the revisions that are being introduced tonight. The other question that I really wanted to address was regarding kind of the process, and I'll scale this down to 2 minutes because I talked about it extensively during the last meeting. A Charter Review Committee was appointed in 2010. We met through over the course of about 13, 14 months, right around there. We had 20 meetings. We had a public forum at the beginning, and we had a public forum at the end. There was 4 resident members, 3 members of the Board of Trustees, including former Village President Douglas Newman. From that process, we submitted recommendations to the Board of Trustees. One of the recommendations was putting the more quote-unquote controversial items on the ballot in November, and that was November 2011. So the version that we're considering tonight, there's 2 versions, but the one that includes the stipend change, or the adding a stipend, and also the title changes, were 2 of the items that were on that November ballot, and they were approved by the voters. So that's kind of the, I see you now, that's kind of the history of what happened. And the reason we're reconsidering it now is that we ultimately still have to make updates to the document and bring it in line with state statute. So the first version that was introduced incorporated the majority of the recommendations from the charter review and also included the items that passed on the ballot by the voters. That covers it.
So are folks interested, kind of going back to my comment from earlier, obviously I have a couple thoughts too if we're going to continue to discuss this tonight.
I would like off the whole board because this is affecting the charter, and I would like to table it so to January so that Trustee Schnall is here to participate in the vote. I think that this is an important decision and that the full board should be available to vote.
I opposed tabling this during the last meeting when Trustee Davis Ford wasn't here, and I oppose tabling it again tonight. I'm prepared to vote tonight.
Are there any other thoughts?
I'm prepared to vote on it. I suggested it last time, but it seems like, there could be someone else missing at the next meeting. I don't know who can make it and who can't make it, and I don't think we can keep, as Trustee Levinson likes to say, kick the can down the road. So I'm fine with voting on it tonight.
I'm in agreement on that. I mean, it's obviously a controversial vote. I don't think anybody's jumping up and wants to do it right away, but I think we should step up and do it.
Okay. Trustee Levison, do you agree?
Yes, I do.
Okay, could we possibly, Mr. President, instead of trying to move one ordinance, approve it or defeat it, and then move on to the next one, what we don't want is a situation where we vote both of them up or both of them down. So can we just take a poll and see where the majority stands on supporting either version 1?
Yeah, I think so, although I think there's probably a little more discussion to be had first.
Okay, I'm fine with that, but I prefer just doing a poll of the members first.
Could I make one clarification on the election date, because this has to be made clear. There are two ways that South Orange could change the election date. One is they could change the date in the charter itself. And the other way is pursuant to the statute, the recent statute, you can adopt an ordinance to do that. Both of these versions of the charter do not change the election date. What they do is they leave the option open so that if the trustees subsequently want to change the date by ordinance, that the charter will be consistent with that. That's the only way that this charter addresses the election date.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. One of the thoughts and kind of questions that I had for the board is the following. So something that we seem to have kind of glossed over a little bit when discussing the charter is not only obviously the enormous amount of time that the Charter Review Committee put into this and all of the public input that was gained during that process, but that in 2011 we did decide to ask the people who live in this town what they wanted to do. And on the question of dropping township from the name, that was voted favorably, almost 70%. On the question of changing the titles to mayor and council, that was voted favorably, I believe in the high 50s, almost 60%. And on the question of the stipends, that actually passed by more votes than I won village president by about 30 or 40 votes. So I guess one of my questions, and maybe just to make that a little bit more sort of tangible for you guys that are here, and obviously we've heard from a few residents tonight who are opposed to some of these changes, although I've heard from quite a few residents who thought that when they voted on that in November of 2011, they were actually voting to change it, and they are absolutely amazed and shocked that we're still even considering this because they thought it was done, which is a little embarrassing to have to explain that we actually haven't taken action 2 years later. But I guess one of the points I would make is that on the first question, 2,067 residents did say yes, and that was to drop township, which there are, I don't think there's much disagreement over, although it's amazing that 30% of people still did vote no for that.
And I'd like to weigh in by dropping township to the individual who said he had no problem as long as there was no liability for doing that. There isn't any.
Yeah, it makes absolutely zero change on anything whatsoever, except that maybe it'll be a little cheaper to print banners in the future.
And the original benefit no longer exists, and
Right.
so.
On the second question, which was to change the titles, which again passed by almost 60%, 1,561 South Orange voters said, yes, please change the titles. On the question of whether we should have stipends or not, which again was just a smidge over 50.5% maybe, 1,330 South Orange residents said, yes, please take stipends. So I think that's important to think about and weigh when making the decision tonight. That we've obviously heard some concerns from folks in the room, and those are just as valuable as the folks who went to the voting booth and told us what they think. And I think we've all probably had conversations with people in coffee shops and on trains and in various places around town who've expressed their opinions about this. But there is a much larger group of people that live in this town other than just the folks who are in the room tonight. And the majority of them on all three of these questions asked us to make these changes. So I guess my question would be, if we put it on the ballot and the voters asked us to do it, what is our prerogative for listening to the voters when we put questions like that out there? You know, what would it have taken for that to provide more weight than it seems to provide? When people ask me why it isn't done, well, again, most people think that that was a binding vote and they thought it was done, at least a lot of people that I've talked to. But sort of, I guess, what gives us the ability to say, well, we did put it on the ballot and we did want people's questions, but we're not going to do it that way. So I'm just kind of curious what people's thoughts are about that.
I don't think that when we put the referendums out there, I don't think there was a full educational pieces that went out taking sides. I don't think there was a public argument about it one way or the other. I think the questions were just put out there. And but let me just finish. And on the issue of stipends, the vote was extremely close, and it's sort of a divisive point. And I understand, you know, the reasons for stipends and the arguments for and against. It's a very divisive thing, and I don't think there was a clear-cut majority. And I think, you know, if another 100 people showed up that day for whatever reason, the vote could have went the other way. But the question is, why did we put it on the ballot? I would actually think I was not really a big fan of referendums, of doing it for this kind of thing, unless we were going to do an educational pieces with it and explaining it. As far as the title changes, I just don't feel they're necessary. It's part of our history. It's part of the history of the town of having those titles, and I prefer the history. So that's where I stand.
Yeah, one of the key items that we have a representative form of government, and we don't make decisions based upon polls or referendum. We heard it. We put it on the ballot. We heard what it was. It's a piece of information for us to make an informed decision, and we are representing the people to make those decisions.
One other sort of comment. There was a comment that was made by a former trustee that there is no systemic classism in government. And I guess, you know, just quickly, you know, it's sort of my morals have to have me say on the record that the fact that someone would say that is the definition of classism, is that there are people who don't understand that there are people that are outside of their own income bracket, and there are major roadblocks in this country in a number of different ways, not just people holding public office, which if you look at the salaries of folks in Congress, you will not see lower class, lower income earning Americans in those governing bodies. And if you look at most elected officials in general, you'll definitely see a per capita income that is skewed much higher than the average per capita income in the state or in the country. There's no question, I think, that people who tend to hold public office tend to be the wealthier. And I guess one of the things that I really love about this town from growing up here is that most people, and I think this was evidenced by what I would consider overwhelming support of stipends at a time when people hate government. People don't think government does a good job. A lot of folks are here complaining tonight about things that we're doing and not many people with compliments. And yet still, that many people who live in town said, yes, it's important enough to pay people a small amount of money so that they don't have to pay out of pocket to be a public servant in the United States as part of the way our democracy is set up. So I think, it'd be actually impossible to intellectually, honestly argue that there's no classism in the way the government is set up or in any number of different things. I would take pride in the ability to make one just tiny small effort in going the other direction by doing stipends here tonight. Again, it's something that is supported by most people who live in this town or who came out to vote. And for most people that I've had conversations with, they understand it has nothing to do with politicians wanting to pay themselves or anything like that. It has to do with a very, very simple, fundamental principle, which is should you or should you not have to pay money out of your own pocket to be a public servant. In this country, there are very, very few requirements to holding public office. To be on this board, you have to be over 18 and you have to be a U.S. citizen, and that is it. There are no other requirements. There's a very, very, very lengthy job interview for it, and that's about it. And it's set up that way so that anybody who wants to can hold public office. That anybody who wants to be part of the group, the government, who makes decisions and has power over an average citizen's life, and their finances, and their schools, and their kids, and their roads, and all those things, that person could be anybody. But that isn't the case. It isn't the case in this community. It hasn't been the case in this community's history even. And it's not the case in a lot of places. And I personally feel that this stipend would go a long way in showing people, hey, it's okay if you're a single parent and you're thinking about running for office and you need to find a way to cover the expenses associated with having all these late night meetings so you get a babysitter for your kid or whatever it is. That there is some small token that says, yes, we want all of you to be eligible to hold this office, and that's just not the case right now. And from my study of political science and from my interaction with dozens and dozens of other mayors and elected officials around New Jersey and across the country, and especially among younger folks that are involved in government, they understand that there are these class divides in our government, and they'd like to fix them. And even when talking with older generations, maybe the baby boomer generation, there were a lot of folks who felt that way 20 or 30 years ago, maybe 40 years ago, when they were younger, and they felt that there was a class divide in government, and at some point, you sort of settle in and you buy a house and you raise some kids and you start having all those worries on a daily basis, and some of these larger philosophical issues, the underpinnings of our democracy end up fading a little bit, and that's okay. But they do need to be thought about, and we have the opportunity to do something about that here. So I would take a huge point of pride, personally, in being able to vote for these stipends and being able to ensure that in the future, obviously this money, none of it is for us. And obviously anybody, if we did pass that, could give up the stipends at any time. Right? There is no requirement to take the money. Just as Governor Corzine took, I think, $1, symbolic salary, and Mayor Bloomberg did in New York City. There's been politicians across the country who defer their salaries, donate it to charity, or give it back to the taxpayers. And anybody that would sit up here in the future would be 100% able to give that money back to the taxpayers if they wanted to. So those are my particular thoughts on why I think this is actually so incredibly important that we do pass it. And I found that most of the folks that I've talked to in town about it, after having a conversation, actually do agree. So I hope that that's part of, aside from the 1,300 people who asked us to pass it at a time when approval ratings of government are at all-time lows, I would just ask that folks consider that when making a decision tonight.
A couple points, and Trustee Rosner, you can help me just recap. The points that the village president raised weren't necessarily where the charter review committee was coming from. To the point of stipends, it goes back, the reason that the most recent charter review committee even looked at it, is the mic on? Yes. was because it was from a recommendation of the last charter review committee that never got approved by the legislature. So you're looking at 2001 being the last charter review. It happens no less than once every 12 years. In 2004, that charter review committee, again comprised of residents, elected officials, had made a recommendation for a stipend at the time for $4,000 for the village president and $3,500 for trustees. So when our charter review committee was appointed in 2011, we essentially went back to recommendations that were made prior to us that had not been approved or put through the legislature, and that's kind of where the starting point came from. When we were debating the stipends, and Mark, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, the classism argument didn't come up because whether you were affluent or if you were struggling, the idea that we looked at was, is there a real true cost to volunteers who are on the Board of Trustees? These were the incremental costs of service to the village, whether it was mileage or printing costs or grabbing coffee with constituents. It was all the things that we do on average on a day-to-day basis. And I'm sure even Trustee Rosner and Trustee Levison would agree that there are costs associated with this position, despite their objection to approving the one with those items in it. And that's what we found from the charter review as well, going back to former elected officials asking them about this item. And they had nothing to gain, obviously. They're no longer in office, but they kind of confirmed that there were costs. So where we came up with those numbers, and they've been reduced. Originally when proposed, there was pension, there was other things involved. We looked at what we thought was a practical number to almost reimburse and compensate trustees for what we expected were these out-of-pocket costs. And what we arrived at was, originally, it was just approving what the last charter review did, and then as we looked at it a little bit more, and the Board of Trustees had actually modified it, was $200 a month for the village president with no other benefits or pension or health care, et cetera, and $150 for the trustees. We thought that was sufficient. So that proposal to the public, at least in my mind, as the resident member of the committee, I wasn't on the Board of Trustees then, was that it was measured in what we were giving to the voters. It didn't run in the gaslight. It wasn't just a question on the ballot. There was a full description of what each one of these items meant, and then everybody receives the sample ballot in advance of general election. And so my support, I told this to the news record, is namely that I was involved with a very good process. I mean, it was run by Village President Newman, so you know it's going to be an impeccable process. I felt like we did our due diligence. We met with stakeholder groups. We had 20-plus public meetings. We solicited as much public input as possible. It was from the public meeting that a resident brought to me, this isn't your charter, this is the community's charter. Why don't you put these controversial items on the ballot? And I thought that was a great idea, so I brought it to the charter review, and I really pushed for these questions to be on the ballot. I thought that was great advice. As you probably noticed, not a lot of questions have been put on the ballot in South Orange, and I like the idea of referendums. I think it's great to get a pulse of the community, despite the fact that it's non-binding. But ultimately, those questions did pass. And so for me to honor that process that took place and honoring that I was a part of a team on a committee and the process was good and the voters spoke to us, puts me in a very awkward position because I feel like we went through that and I'd like to support the things that were approved by the voters. I can 100% understand some of the concerns that were raised. I mean, even Trustee Goldberg raised at the time, how do you stop this from being a slippery slope? How do you make it so that what's very modest right now and reasonable doesn't turn into something that the public wouldn't support? And from that, the Charter Review Committee said, you know what, let's put the numbers in the charter itself. Don't let it be done by ordinance. Don't let the board be able to vote on this themselves. Make it ingrained in the charter itself so that in the event it ever gets changed, it goes through this whole public process all over again with the Charter Review Committee coming to the board for ratification, et cetera. So that was our way of attempting to find some level of compromise between the concerns that we heard about things escalating and then also just wanting to do what was right by the people who served on this Board of Trustees. And as I mentioned, I don't know if it's any consolation, but the actual stipends wouldn't take effect until the expiration of all the terms of the sitting members of the Board of Trustees. We did realize it would be awkward for the governing body at the time to be in a position when they were voting on something that may ultimately benefit them. So our recommendation from the Charter Review to the Board of Trustees was have it begin after the expiration of the terms of all the sitting members. So technically the first, $1,800 stipend wouldn't kick in until 2015 when 4 members of the board have an expiration of their term. And then the next set would be myself, Trustee Clark, and Trustee Schnall, whose terms aren't up until 2017. I mean, we were just elected in May. So just so you understand, at least where I'm coming from, is that I felt like it was very thoughtful what we did, and I thought that the public voted on it. So I will be supporting the first version tonight, the one with all the recommendations, the ones that passed on the ballot. And then, as I told Trustee Rosner and Trustee Levison, ultimately I just want to update our charter. Right now there's a lot of antiquated language that's superseded by state law that actually preempts our charter. So we have an antiquated document that no longer guides us. It's almost like organizational bylaws. You need those up to date. So I will support the first version, and then if that doesn't pass during our straw poll of the trustees, I'm more than happy to support the second version, and let's just move something along to the legislature to get us where we need to be.
Very well said. You blew away Adam's 3-minute time limit, but I don't disagree with anything you said, and my position hasn't changed.
Okay.
Well, I think some of the issues have been mitigated for the stipend, us passing a resolution that allows for reimbursement of expenses, at least the majority of the expenses that have been described. The other part of it is that it gives an incumbent an advantage in an election. Here we are giving people stipends who are running against individuals which we say may not be able to afford going after elected office. There is an advantage that we're giving for the use of that stipend for that campaign. So I don't support stipends at all. I think we've mitigated the majority of the costs associated to what we have, and it's covered. And I would vote against the stipend.
Hey, are there other kind of comments or questions, or maybe it's time to go around and take this straw poll?
I would just want to add that I have to admit I have struggled with this one throughout the week. I know I've spoken with a bunch of you about it, and I do want to thank Sheena for her work on the Charter Review, because I think it was a very thorough process, and I think that that level of work, you're obviously heavy invested in it. I also want to laud the village president in trying not to lose sight of the higher goals. I would say, though, I don't think a stipend alone, especially the incredibly modest stipend that we have in the charter, is going to get that done. If you look around, I know part of the Charter Review was a survey of adjacent municipalities and the wider municipalities, and most of them, if not all of them, of any size, have some type of recompense for whatever they're calling it. I don't know that classism has been abolished for any of those communities. Unfortunately, while I think that's a laudable goal, I don't know if a stipend really gets it done. That's basically where I'm at now. I think, to Howard's point, some of the other concerns have been mitigated. And I think the other thing to consider is for anyone running for office, first they have to get elected. And unfortunately, that is also a financial hurdle. And so, yeah, we may have a problem as far as representative democracy goes, whether it's at a municipal level, state level, or federal level in that regard. But again, I don't know if the modest stipend is really going to make that big a difference as far as addressing that particular issue here in South Orange. What I do not want to see happen is the baby getting thrown out with the bathwater because of one or two controversial items. The rest of the the charter work being plowed under. I just don't think that's smart.
There were a total of, just clarification, in terms of the charter recommended changes, there's a total of about 36 of them that were just updates to make sure that we were conforming with existing state statutes. So we've talked a lot about these 2 items, but there's a lot more that we really need to move on to the legislature. The last time there was an update was 1988, and most people can imagine a lot has changed since that point in time.
Okay. So why don't we start with, if folks are interested in supporting what's already been proposed. So that's kind of the charter with all the different
Okay, so the
changes.
First one you're
So
suggesting
that's the ordinance
we-
that we're currently at right
on
now,
the
which is
second
on the
reading.
table. Yep.
Yep, I will be supporting that one first.
Okay. Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
No.
No.
I'm going to vote no.
Okay.
Okay, so I move to strike.
It's already on the table.
Oh, I'm sorry, I need to pick it up. I move to lift it off the table.
Okay, there's a motion to take ordinance 2013-19
Off the table.
off
Off
the
the
table.
table.
Second?
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, so the ordinance is off the table.
Okay, and I'm moving to strike it, seeing as though the straw poll didn't go that direction.
You can do it one of 2 ways. You can strike the enacting clause, or you can vote it down.
Okay, move to strike the enacting clause.
Okay?
Okay, so moved.
Second it.
Seconded by Trustee Davis Ford. Why don't we take a roll, please?
Sure.
Wait,
Trustee Clark?
is this on tabling and striking, or?
This is
Striking it.
striking that first
It's
version.
like eliminating it.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Collin?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ward?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
The board is approved to strike ordinance 2013-19.
Okay. So we have a few other ordinances on second reading this evening.
Can you, Mr. President, can you just explain to the public what's going to happen later in the meeting with the first reading for the second revision?
Well,
so
there'll be
that
a
they
first
know?
reading in not too long for the revised and restated charter that would include all of the changes except title changes and stipends. But first, the next ordinances for second reading.
Yes. The next ordinance for second reading, ordinance 2013-22, an ordinance to request the County of Essex to lower the speed limit from 35 miles per hour to 25 miles per hour on portion of Valley Street from the border of Maplewood Township to South Orange Avenue.
Okay, seeing as this is the second reading of this ordinance, I'd like to open it up for public hearing. Is there any members of the public who wish to comment on this ordinance?
Can you just explain so they understand?
I could explain it, which is just kind of in the title, lowering the speed limit from 35 to 25 miles an hour to match the speed limit on the Maplewood side of the border.
This is to match what Maplewood did.
Yes.
on their
Maplewood
section
had
of
already
Valley and
made the
the other part of
change.
Scotland, so.
Yes.
Yeah,
So you had the same speed limit. Doesn't
Are there,
say-
hold on, are there any members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance? Okay, seeing as there are no members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance, I'd like to close the public hearing. Are there any questions or
Yes.
comments from the board?
Yes, I do have a question. I meant to email it previously. When does the 25 mile an hour go into effect in Maplewood?
I'm sorry, what, can you repeat it?
When does it go into effect?
When
in
does the
Maplewood?
25 mile an hour speed limit go into effect in Maplewood?
I can't honestly answer that. I know they finished their second reading about 4 months ago.
Yeah, and I
Yeah,
noticed the
so I don't know if
signs,
they put the new signs up yet.
the signs are still 35 mile limit.
Yeah, because these ordinances are being adopted in order to induce the county to change
Yeah.
the speed limit. So that's not going to change until the county changes.
And I believe this Maplewoods may have come before the county.
And yeah, that Maplewood had already worked with the county on doing
Yeah.
the traffic study, so they had the blessing of the county to move it down to 25, so they seem to be partnering with them. And then the last piece was our section of Valley, especially being smushed between two 25-mile-per-hour zones. So we can certainly follow up on that, but I'd imagine that they would do the whole, if they haven't done Maplewood already, they would just do all of us at once.
Okay, any other questions? Have a motion?
I move.
Moved by trustee Collins.
Second.
Seconded by trustee Davis Ford. Could we have the roll, please?
Yes. Trustee Collins?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnall is absent. The board has adopted ordinance.
Yeah,
Trustee Clark, excuse me.
Yes.
Trustee Clark. The board has adopted ordinance number 2013-22 on second reading. Ordinance 2013-23, an ordinance to amend certain sections of the land use portion of the South Orange Code to further define when a portable garbage bin is permitted in the public right-of-way.
Thank you. Seeing as this is the second reading of this ordinance, I'd like to open it up if there are any members of the public who wish to comment on it.
Just like to know what it's about. If you could cover that.
Could you just state your name and address for the record, please?
Bob Adler, 120 Ralston.
Okay.
Just say something about what it's about.
Trustee Levison, do you want to-
What prompted it?
Sure. Are there, are there any other members of the public who want to comment on this ordinance?
I'd like to know what the big problem is.
Well, it's a
You can't do that from the seat. He has to come
Yeah,
to the mic
just
and put
hold
his
on,
phone
sir.
number.
Can you go ahead and explain it?
It's a clarification of a current ordinance that we have. It's the clarification of when a permit is issued for putting a dumpster or a garbage disposal unit in the street versus it being in a driveway.
And to take care of certain safety issues so that they're adequately lit, so that someone doesn't drive into them in the dark at night, all such good things.
It's clarification.
Are there any other members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance? Okay, seeing as there's no more members of the public who wish to speak about this ordinance, I'd like to close public comments, and unless there's any further questions or comments from the board, can I have a motion?
I move.
Moved by trustee Levison.
I second.
Seconded by trustee Rosner. Could we have the roll, please?
Yes. Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Collins?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
The board has adopted ordinance 2013-23 on second reading. Ordinance 2013-24, an ordinance to amend the code of the Township of South Orange Village, section 153-33, Schedule 1, with respect to parking on Western Drive North and Western Drive South.
Okay, thank you. So this is the ordinance that a number of folks have commented about tonight. Trustee Collins, seeing as this has come up through the Public Safety Committee, do you want to give a bit more of a description? I know there were some questions about what exactly was happening with the parking, and even though we kind of have it listed, it's not that clear. So if you want to run through that real quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, let's just give a description of it first, and we can open it up for public comment.
I'm sorry.
You can go ahead and give just a brief description of the ordinance.
Okay, this was a carryover item from the last Public Safety Committee meeting, or last Public Safety Committee. A resident had brought this up about maybe a year or so ago and brought about concerns about, this is a horseshoe, and that at the bend itself, that when you had double parking, it would limit an emergency vehicle's ability to actually pass through. So that began at the Public Safety Committee. Like I said, roughly about a year ago. It was tabled at the time because we saw the same level of opposition from residents within the neighborhood itself. So we agreed to table it, and the idea was that we would have our South Orange Transportation Advisory Committee, who the chair is a traffic engineer, work with the neighborhood on some level of compromise that would meet the needs of the majority of the neighborhood and hopefully address the public safety concern. So ultimately, the South Orange Transportation Advisory Committee did a walkabout with about a dozen or so residents. Both myself and Trustee Rosner were in attendance, and he basically took the residents through the various opportunities to try and address the challenges of such a narrow road. Through that process, he submitted a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. We then took it to our public safety departments, namely our fire department, to see, at the time, Chief Markey, what he thought about the width of the street and where the real challenges were, and whether or not the recommendation from the SOTAC Advisory Committee would actually address the public safety concerns that were raised by the residents. So at that point, we had a recommendation from the advisory committee. We had approval from the Public Safety Committee, and then we brought it to the Board of Trustees on first reading. So this is actually the process working. We thought we came up with something that would work with the majority of residents. We have a first reading. By second reading is the public forum to hear back from people what they think about this proposal and whether it would suffice. And so today we received, as the gentleman said earlier, and I got the chance to speak with him earlier today, that there's about 20 residents representing 13 houses.
Before we get into more of a discussion, I just wanted to give a description before we open it up for public comment.
Yeah.
I'll go through the rest
Thank
afterwards.
you. So at this time, I'd like to open the meeting up to any member of the public who wishes to speak about this ordinance in particular.
Okay.
If you spoke before, you're allowed to speak again. If you haven't spoken yet, you're allowed to speak at this time, only about this ordinance.
Catherine Abrams, 299 Western Drive South, South Orange. This ordinance came up by a private citizen, a resident bringing it up, which is a good way to start a bill, but it didn't come up as a result of the fire department bringing it up as an evident problem to them. So is this something that the city is looking at for all of the streets in the town as a result of this one residence having brought it up? Or is this, I guess if a guy doesn't like traffic, you know, at his corner of the street, and he can see that why do we all have to have our parking situation changed?
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time? You speak as many times as you like. Just come up to the microphone, state your name and address.
No, Trustee Collins said that it was presented to the fire chief, Chief Markey, and I guess that's what I want to know. Did the fire department, the police department, and the rescue squad say, we need this to be done in order to protect the people on the street or in order to get our equipment through? I didn't hear that. It was implied. But that's what I want to know. Did the fire department say, you need to do this because we can't get our trucks through?
Okay. Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing at this time, seeing as there's nobody else who wishes to speak, and if you'd like to address
the questions that were raised. I would love to do every single block in South Orange, quite frankly. I'd love to see us do a comprehensive traffic study of every road, because we have a lot of narrow roads. Right now, we don't have that in the budget. It hasn't been budgeted. So technically how it works is a concerned citizen will bring it to the Board of Trustees whenever they witness, you know, something that they think could be dangerous, and that's how this whole process began. Similarly, in Tuxedo Park, so it is very much ad hoc. And then once we pull in our professionals to assess the width of the street, whether double parking would allow them to get our vehicles through. And when I said, Mr. Adler, that it was approved through the Public Safety Committee, that is myself, Trustee Clark, and Trustee Rosner, and both of our police and fire chief serve on that committee. So their assessment at that time, specifically the fire chief, was that the width of the street with cars double parked on both sides would not allow an emergency vehicle, such as the fire truck, which is our largest, to pass through successfully. That is not unique to Western Drive. We have that in a lot of neighborhoods, and we see very often that most neighbors don't have complaints about it because the likelihood that you have the double parking at the exact same time that there's an emergency on the street, it doesn't happen. very often, as we heard from the residents there, is that for as long as you've lived there, it hasn't been a problem. So this is almost being preventative, hoping that something doesn't go wrong. As I was saying about Tuxedo Park, they were dealing with the same challenges. We passed something on second reading at the last meeting, but essentially they coalesced their entire neighborhood. They did a survey internally, they got people to buy in to what the recommendation from public safety was. So by the time it came to us, we knew that we had not only the board's support for it, but that they had reached out to the individual residents. Did 100% of them agree? No, I wish we could get 100% approval on anything, but we don't. But on most part, the majority did feel that limiting one side of the street parking on several streets within Tuxedo Park was a good thing. And they did that at the recommendation of public safety as the primary concern. So that's what we're doing with all the neighborhoods right now. Again, we can't tackle all of them. I wish that we could, but this one in particular was because a resident who lives a part of the curve brought it to public safety, and it was actually Trustee Goldberg who began the process of trying to address what the residents' concern was.
And I think this is not a completely unique situation, but because of the shape of this particular road, the turns are pretty acute. And if I remember correctly, the chief did come here and say, yeah, it's a problem.
He did testify during the last round.
I have one question for council. Mr. Rothers, I have a question for you regarding this. Would the village itself be at any concern for liability if, having identified the narrowness on those corners and the potential for a problem with getting an emergency vehicle through, if we did not change it and then there was a fire, I forgot that.
No, if indeed it was a real risk, that was proven to you to be a real risk, and there's no money involved in curing the problem, essentially. There potentially could be, and obviously anybody could sue you for it, and it would be, the kind of case that you'd have to vigorously defend.
I have two questions. The first one is for Barry. Was a notice sent out by mail to all the residents on the street regarding this ordinance?
Yeah, I think they were hand-delivered, but it wasn't until Friday.
They were hand-delivered? My question is, why didn't it get out sooner? Why Friday?
I think it was just an oversight. The previous times that we've done this on with these parking ordinances was done by the former clerk, and I think there was just a breakdown in communication of who was handling it.
Because I think there's a legitimate there's a legitimacy to the resident that came up and said, we just got this notice on Friday. It really doesn't give ample time. I know that personally, with my schedule, when mail comes in, it may be 4 or 5 days before I get to look at the pile after dealing with everything else. So that's a real concern, that maybe they didn't have time, all the neighbors, to look at it and see what was coming before the board. And so that I'm sure in the future that when we have a scenario like this, that we'll do better noticing.
Well, sure, and just to be clear, there isn't a legal requirement for the notice. This is a courtesy that, and certainly what I support, that the village has done in where you have an ordinance that uniquely affects a certain defined group on a street or one neighborhood to provide the residents. So it's not a legal impediment, but certainly we could and should and will in future get the notices.
Yeah, that courtesy just works for everyone to get a buy-in, at least they're informed.
Sure.
And I know that we met all our statutory requirements with the publication in the newspapers and in the proper time. I know that those statutory requirements were met, but this courtesy is just very important to make sure that people have an opportunity to be informed. But I won't beat that up because we know we're going to make sure that we do a better job in that. The second question I have, just for my edification, is how many houses are on that street? Does anyone have a sense? The reason why I asked that...
I'm looking at it on Google. I think there's about 30.
30? Because someone came to the mic and said...
There was 21 based on the spreadsheet.
Someone came to the mic and said they had 21 signatures, so I don't know if that's individuals or 21
We sent out 21 letters.
There's 21 signatures representing 12 or 13 homes.
Looks like
13 households.
33 houses. give or take.
33 houses, and so this person with the petition is representing about a third of the households.
And to be clear, when I spoke to, no, Jeremy, I can't remember the last name, Mr. Gerber, is that correct? Garber? It appears that the support for the ordinance as written comes from people around the bend, which kind of experience the blind sides and the double parking when that does happen, like what happens if an emergency is here, whereas the ones on the lower half, on both sides, generally are opposed to the restrictions. So you're seeing it as it becomes a problem, those people support it, and the ones further down do not. So that's kind of the breakdown of what we're looking at.
Barry, did the notice that went out, did it contain a drawing, a diagram of what the change was? Do you know?
No, it did.
I don't think it
No, it was the letter.
I think this is a
We had
case.
the ordinance attached also. The letter, there was a letter and the ordinance was.
I think this is a case where a picture is worth 1,000 words, because I remember initially going over this with the chair of the Traffic Advisory Committee, and the verbal description and the written description were confusing. But when I finally drew a picture of it, and when he drew a picture of it, then it made much more sense to me. And I wonder if, to some degree, some of the residents aren't experiencing the same thing. I find it kind of hard to believe that they are in favor of, kind of cutting themselves off in a potential emergency situation, which could be really significant for parking when they still have parking on the opposite side, or maybe even on their own side, depending upon which it is. And so I'm wondering if maybe some more comprehensive outreach would be beneficial.
I would actually support that. I don't feel like there's any need to hustle right now, especially if we could provide the visual of this. From what the Transportation Advisory Committee came up with it was alternate, because Dan had looked at the way that people enter the neighborhood and the way that they exit, and didn't want a situation where people would try and turn around in the middle of the block to get on the appropriate side for parking. So it's not your typical outer ring or inner ring of one side of the street parking. It's alternate until you get around the bend. So in the absence of a visual, and I do think the visual will certainly help, I re-forwarded to the Board of Trustees the recommendation from SOTAC today. So to the gentleman's point who said earlier, like, I don't even get what this is, it's like, okay, we're perhaps a little too close to it because we've seen the recommendations and we've seen the visual. So I would be okay if the board would allow me to table this for the time being, and we will renotice it appropriately through the mail, and then also include the attachment, and maybe even just clarify the public safety aspect of this, because we heard people speak tonight, but based on what I said, I'd really like to know whether the neighborhood changes its views, knowing that our fire chief has said that with double parking, his vehicle cannot get through on your block.
Double parking, you really don't mean double parking, you mean parking
on both sides. Parking on both
double
sides.
parking is different than parking on both sides.
And just
Let me clarify. And then the other thing,
just to clarify on Sheena's comment about the fire truck. The fire truck said he could make it up the street, but they need clearance on both sides of the truck, not only to stabilize the truck for the men to work, and they prefer to have 8 feet, but 4 feet at the very minimum on each side. And that's where the issue was on any street I think this street was 28 or 29 feet wide. And so any street that's under this 30 feet wide is the ones that we have to look at. And I have no problem, doing it again, but I would like to say, if we're gonna go back and revisit, we have to figure out a way that we get at least 75% of the residents at one meeting.
That's where I was going.
We've had one meeting where, and I think this goes back to when Trustee Goldberg ran a meeting, and we had 6 or 7 residents at that one, and then the night we met with Dan Peterson, there were 7 or 8 residents. I don't know how many houses they represented.
But they came out and supported
that were there, and they was the ones who were supporting it, and then they had residents. So we need to figure out a way to make sure we get 75%.
You know what, we need to really have a process that we
have a process.
The reason why I asked the number of houses on the road, on that road, that whenever we make these sort of changes regarding street, whatever it is, but we should have a poll. So if there are 32 houses, we should have a poll and know the majority of people support this or not.
Well, it's not necessarily just supporting it.
We
It's
had a
whether we reach
similar
out to
problem
everyone.
with Meadowbrook. Remember Meadowbrook?
Yeah, if we get advice from the fire chief and the rescue squad telling us that there's a safety issue on this street, we have to address that. And I understand the personal dislikes of having altered the street or the side parking or anything like that, but we still have a responsibility to make sure that the public safety comes first. And the desire to park right in front of your house is the secondary. But at the same time, I would like to work on it with the residents and a solution that we could come to, and one that the police chief and the rescue squad are going to sign off on.
I mean, we get a lot of the quality of life parking ordinances where people just want to maintain peace in front of their home and they don't want commuters there. That's one where I would agree the process of, getting neighbors to coalesce and sign a petition is appropriate. If something's brought to our attention and we have our professionals on staff and our public safety officials and they give us a recommendation based on, the width of a street, I tend to always honor that. I will be voting on something that allows for around the bend, not for that parking on both sides to prohibit an emergency vehicle getting through.
And I understand that. I have no problem with that. I just want to be sure that everyone on the street that this change impacts is fully informed.
We'll do our best.
Agreed.
I'll move the table.
I second.
Okay, moved by trustee Rosner to table 2013-24. And seconded by trustee Column. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions?
Mr. President, as a next step, unless there's any objections from the Board of Trustees, I'd like to ask our Transportation Advisory Committee Chair to go ahead and create the little briefing packet of what this was. He gave us a full memo, but maybe it can accompany the ordinance that gets mailed to all the residents on the block. Is that okay with everyone?
That'd be fine.
Good? Okay, thank you.
Okay, so next is a ordinance we have that was tabled for first reading.
Yes. Ordinance 2013-20, an ordinance to amend the Central Business District redevelopment plan.
Okay, this was an ordinance that was going to change some definitions for retail spaces on secondary streets in the downtown, and also I believe the live work was still included in this. Trustee Rosner, it sounded like from the last meeting we tabled this that you were going to get to have a little bit more of an input from either our planner or from the Planning and Zoning Committee. Were you able to do that?
Yeah, I actually thought it was sent to the full board, but...
It was sent.
It was.
You did.
Yeah, well, okay. Yeah, I sent the changes that came from the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Committee done with the village planner, Susan Gruhl of Higher Gruhl, and I sent them on to the full board for comments. Only one trustee sent back any comments on it, so I feel comfortable moving forward with it.
Okay, do you want to move to take it off the table?
I'll move to take it off the table.
I second.
Okay, moved by trustee Rosner, seconded by trustee Levison to take it off the table. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Are there questions or comments on any of this? And maybe Mr. Lewis, do you want to just give a 2-second rundown of some of the changes that we've discussed as part of this ordinance for the benefit of anybody who's watching tonight?
On the central business district?
Yeah.
Yeah, and, well, basically, it identifies, and I don't have it right in front of me, but there are, I think, 4 streets total that are off of South Orange Avenue that now provide, currently there's a no offices and no professional offices on the first floor prohibition. And what I think experience has shown is that a number of these side streets are not, at least as attractive for retail as South Orange Avenue. And given that there was plenty of space still available on South Orange Avenue, there was a belief that some of these side streets, I know it's Vose, it's, I think, Comstock, it's a couple others.
Scotland.
Scotland from, coming from South Orange Ave for the one block that's within the district, Vose for the block that's within the district, to provide some additional flexibility and allow offices and professional offices on those first floors under certain conditions that are, and basically it's done by an overlay where those particular streets are identified, and on the first floor then there's permitted use, certain minimum requirement sizes, certain definitions of what's permitted, but that's essentially what it does.
Okay.
Wasn't Third Street included? Third?
No. There's Church Street, a portion of Church Street is included. That's correct, right, Barry? Off of South Orange Ave?
What's that?
A portion of Church Street is included in the office overlay?
Again, when you go down South Orange, you make a left, going in about 1 block deep on Church Street is within the CBD, so that also falls under that.
One chance. Deborah's asking the same question.
Yeah, the Third and Valley was a separate ordinance, which we took care of for the live work.
It has its own separate district.
Redevelopment plan?
Yep.
There is, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Did you want to move?
No, I was going to open to discussion. I just want to make sure that everybody is, I think I've been pretty clear that I'm not going to be supporting this because I don't like the rezoning. Just for my own personal reasons, I don't want the office overlay. But so everybody's clear of what this essentially does is that in areas right now in the streets that Mr. Lewis had identified, we hope for retail. That's in our master plan, it's in our vision plan, et cetera. Those were areas identified for the walkable downtown where you do shopping and dining, et cetera. I understand some of the challenges and why this is being introduced, but ultimately what we're doing is taking the definition of office and professional office space, which is permitted uses on the second floor, and we're allowing them to now occur in the office overlay on the first floor. So people are clear on what the definitions are. An office is a room, group of rooms, or buildings used for conducting the affairs of business, profession, service, industry, or government, but where no retail sales of goods are offered and where no manufacturing, assembling, or fabricating takes place. A professional office, again, both now permitted uses if this passes, a room or suite of rooms wherein the business of a physician, dentist, architect, engineer, or other professional person may be carried on. In addition, there is a new definition that didn't previously exist, which is a wellness center, which essentially sets forth what's already under professional office, but there are some limitations which are good. It shall be a hospital-sponsored center. It shall not include surgery centers or labs, and here's a new component which I think is good. It shall have a parking standard of 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet of gross floor area. So that in a simplified form is the major change in this new office overlay. And then the majority of everything else that the planner did, I agreed with. And so it looks good. If you agree with allowing that on the first floor in the office overlay, secondary streets that don't front on South Orange Avenue, then everything else looks pretty good.
Yeah. I also just want to clarify that this, we did originally discuss this with the development committee, who had come forth with a recommendation for the changes on those side streets, partially because we are having trouble attracting retail on those streets, and we wanted to fully maximize, and this would help. These professional offices could help bring more people to the downtown who might meander over to the main shopping district, and that's part of the impetus behind it. It's not just this thing out of the blue. So it came from those discussions, which started a couple of years ago, including allowing different types of offices on the first floor. And as we've already seen, we've already lost a couple of businesses, and we really need to make sure we focus on getting retail. South Orange Avenue, Sloan Street, Village Plaza, which we consider our main business district, versus the side streets being Vos and parts of Valley Street. And that's where it really all is coming from. So we're not making any dramatic changes to the main shopping district. This is on the outskirts, the side streets, to help the whole downtown as a whole.
And I think part of the idea too, and there are a lot of other towns like Summit that have zoning ordinances that are more in line with this than what we have currently. And part of the idea is that people visit these professional offices, and whether it's a wellness center where they're going in to get their blood taken or something like that, or they're doing a regular checkup, that they're going to go out to lunch afterwards and visit some of the other businesses in town. So part of the idea with having these sort of ancillary and peripheral streets like Vos, where these offices exist, is that they're going to bring people to the town, to South Orange, that wouldn't otherwise have come here, and then hopefully those people will see that we've got a whole lot of great local businesses in our, right next door in our main central business district, on the primary areas where the retail exists, and they'll go grab a bite to eat, or they'll stop in a store and buy something. So part of the intention here is to create more economic investment and activity in the downtown.
I would add, though, our downtown core is very small. It's not a huge if you're going to allow professional offices, we have so many different zones where that's already allowed. The purpose of the vision plan and the master plan and having the downtown core was to identify the parameters of where we really wanted the retail on the first floor and we wanted the restaurants, where we didn't want the professional services. And I love professional services, who doesn't? But they belong in certain areas within the zones and based on your community's values. I have absolutely nothing against one of the proposals that's on the table. I think it is going to be fantastic for the community. The question is, where is the appropriate location for what we're trying to build for the town? And I think through the vision planning process, we were pretty clear about what we wanted and where, and soon you start seeing it diminish. I mean, you don't plan for what's existing right now, you plan for the future. Everything that you aspire to is within these plans that you pass by the governing body. And I feel moving forward, we have so many opportunities. We have, a great new executive director who's going to be working on recruitment with the Village Center Alliance. It doesn't seem like we gave this enough time to really see the fruition of the vision plan before getting a proposal and saying, all right, let's look at redoing zoning to address it.
In that amount of time, we've seen more stores disappear or stores having trouble surviving. And we also have, there are other issues involved in the whole downtown picture and the vision plan. And I think the vision plan themselves have also said that you always have to watch out, if you don't hit certain growth, you'd expect certain stores not to happen or certain growth to happen. And they were particularly talking about Vos because it wasn't moving further north on Vos Avenue, and they're having particular problems when you don't have retail on both sides of the street. And I understand there were pros and cons to this, but we've also been walking a fine line on some of the stores that we allow now, and I don't want to pick on any stores, but we know there are certain places on South Orange Avenue and even on Sloane Street, they're not traditional retail stores already. And I think that we need to, maybe even more clearly define those things if this helps to more clearly define and limit what's in our business district. So we only have true retail or restaurants in that area, because we've already gotten away from that on those things. And I don't think the vision plan calls for some of those places to be in there either. At least that's not what any of us envisioned when we were working on the vision plan. And I think this could help refocus or redefine how we're doing all that. And I understand the long-term concerns about growth, and listen, 5 or 10 years from now, we may have to go back and say, listen, we've got to redo it. But market conditions also drive some of this, and certain types of professional offices will never be able to survive at the rents that are in a true retail space. And that would also help drive us to the right direction that we want to go. But this is about making sure we fill in empty storefronts with at least businesses that we find acceptable, whether they're professionals or not. And we've seen in Milburn where they have non-traditional banks or Fidelity type offices, and Summit and wellness centers, and you can see what's going on with retail in small town America, and with a couple of towns being major exceptions, like Westfield, I know, which has tremendous spaces. It doesn't know, many downtowns are dying, and the landlords need more tools to fill up all those spaces. And, there are spaces like the Blockbuster space and Love and Ross, which is coming, and whatever else. And I think this will help us define and make sure we get retail there and not going off onto the side, and build up our main streets first and then go on to the secondary ones.
I think one of the main challenges that the Village Center Alliance has talked about that they deal with is retail and competing with online, and how easy it is to do that. And they have to find reasons to get people into our town to experience the retail district, because it has to be experiencing it. It can't just be about the exchange that happens in a retail place. And I think we have to remember that it is the central business district, and if we can do something else, make it a little bit more flexible, we're not ruling out that retail could be there later on. I think we are allowing another reason for people to come to our town.
Thank you.
Okay.
There was a motion by Trustee Levison, second by Trustee Davis-Ford.
Yes.
We have the roll, please.
Roll call. Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Davis-Ford? Trustee Collin?
No.
Trustee Davis-Ford?
Yes.
Okay. Trustee Schnall is absent. Ordinance
What about me?
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
It's past
We
my
only skip,
bedtime.
we only skip over the no votes, not the yes ones.
Ordinance 2013-20 passed on first reading.
Okay, we have one more ordinance on first reading.
That is ordinance 2013-25, an ordinance approving a draft revised and restated charter for the Township of South Orange Village, incorporating some of the revisions recommended by the Charter Review Committee, and authorizing the submission of the same to the New Jersey Legislature for enactment into law.
Thank you. So I'm not sure how much more discussion we need to have. This is the ordinance that is the different version of the one that we considered earlier that takes out the stipends and the title changes. I guess, my one thought to throw out there for our board before we vote on it is that I would see voting on this particular ordinance, this particular version of the charter, without the recommendations that the Charter Review Committee made, without the recommendations that the voters asked us to do, is a little bit disappointing and disrespectful to the well over 1,000 people, 1,300, 1,500, 2,000 people who asked us to make these changes.
I move it.
I second.
Moved by Trustee Levison, seconded by Trustee Collin. We have the roll, please.
Yes. Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Collin?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levinson?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Schnall is absent. The board has approved ordinance 2013-25 on first reading.
Thank you.
I move that ordinance number 2013-20 and 2013-25 be scheduled for a second reading and final passage at the January 27, 2013 board meeting, and a public hearing be held at that time for the reference ordinances. The acting village clerk will be authorized to take the necessary actions to publish public notice for such hearing.
Moved by Trustee Davis Ford.
Second.
Seconded by Trustee Levison. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Okay, next is a tabled resolution.
Resolution 2013-246, resolution selecting option for new rescue squad facility and authorizing the preparation of plans, specification consistent therewith.
Thank you. So this is something that we've kind of bounced from meeting to meeting. Unfortunately, I'm going to ask the board not to consider this again tonight. We got the last round of design options back last week, and Mr. Lewis and I met with members of the development committee. Trustee Rosner and Trustee Collin were there as well, to have a discussion and try and get their feedback about the process, and if they had any ideas on how to save some big bucks on any of the spaces. What we are waiting for is one final option from our cost estimators and architects, and so that's being able to present the trustees with really two options, but really it's kind of four options if you want to look at all of them. That being the original two designs where you had a rescue squad building on Sloan Street with 4 bays, and you had an option that had a space for an emergency shelter and an option for without that space. And what we'd like to be able to present after discussions with the rescue squad, they actually volunteered taking out one of those bays, if that would help reduce the cost of the project and move things along. So they offered to take out one of the 4 bays and make it 3 bays instead of 4. So unfortunately, that didn't actually save quite as much as we were hoping it would. But what we'd like to be able to do, and we don't have all of this back from the architects and cost estimators yet, what we'd like to be able to do in January is present to the board with probably 2 weeks ahead of time where people are going to get a chance to really look over all the documents. I know the 2 trustees that were at the development committee meeting did get a much better chance to talk more about kind of the whole process. But the trustees will have ample time to consider that, and then what we'll have really is the 2 3-bay options. So one option of a 3-bay rescue squad on Sloan Street without an emergency shelter space and one with. And then at that point, the trustees can weigh the different cost options between the two. So when we asked the architects last time for this information, basically what they passed along was they did one 3-bay option that was almost kind of in the middle. It was a little bit of a bigger space for the meeting room then was in the 4-bay option without the shelter space, but it was just one option. So we'd like to be able to take both those options back to the board. We are 100% confident, Mr. Lewis, if you want to speak to any of this or elaborate on any, please feel free to, that they're going to have everything done, I think, by the first week of January. And so the trustees are going to have plenty of time to consider everything. It'll probably be for the second meeting in January. And at that point, that will give us a couple things. One is, again, time for you guys to consider all the different options, look at all the different history, see kind of the progress of how we've tried to value engineer the building. The second is that also gives us a chance when we do get those two options back, if we want, which we probably will, is to sit down with the development committee again and have another discussion. We had a good preliminary discussion with them last week, but once we get those two options back, we'll have a better sense of did this save enough money and is this kind of close to budget, or do we still need to kind of try and figure some things out? So give us a chance to have that discussion as well, and then by the end of January, we'll be in a position, hopefully, where we can just pick one, and that'll be it. I don't know, Mr. Lewis, if you want to add anything.
I would just add that, it was, I think, a very helpful meeting with the development committee last week. We were, reviewing a few of the final options. Representatives of Jonathan Rose, the architect, we can, if necessary, have the appropriate personnel as well at the Board of Trustee meetings to explain, to address any questions. In the other sense, one of the things was, perhaps optimistically or naively, there was originally a thought that if everything fell together nicely, we could actually have the new one built and they could move right in before it became necessary for them to vacate over on 3rd Street, and that clearly is not going to happen. We have, and I will be in the relatively near future, I think, sharing with the board and ultimately seeking approval for identified some interim space for the rescue squad to lease that would meet their needs. It's been vetted with the rescue squad. We're kind of negotiating with the property owner at this point.
Just for clarity, it just might be worth mentioning that when we started this process, by the time we started the process, we were already past the point. From Jonathan Rose, who's managing this project, it's not like in the past couple months we've kind of crossed the line. We were apparently over the line from the beginning. And that we were, no matter what we were going to do, as soon as after our discussion here about which space to select, that we were already going to have to find, some sort of interim space. So that's when we started talking to the rescue squad about.
Certainly, once the location started to take a little time to look at, it was, like I said, it was obviously overly optimistic. But my only point being is that I think, and again, the squad has seen the space that we're talking about. They're satisfied it will meet their needs on an interim basis. So the sort of sense of urgency, and clearly we were not rushing this, but I think that we're covered in that respect, and I think it's the appropriate thing to do is to take whatever time it takes to do all the due diligence, try and value engineer as much as we possibly can, and I think we'll be in a position to do that and then make that presentation on the 27th.
One question. One of the things that the development committee had brought up at the meeting was who should build the building, whether it's in the best interest from the cost perspective, whether it be the village or it actually be the rescue squad. They had mentioned, I know nothing about this, but one of the suggestions was transferring the title with a deed restriction. I thought that was a good suggestion that should be pursued a little bit more, because if they're in a position to build this at a lot lower cost than us as a government entity. And so can the administration please consider working with village council to investigate that a little bit more?
We are, and I don't know if that was before or after the village president left to go to the planning board meeting, but the issue related to prevailing wage and the requirement to pay prevailing wage, which on all public projects mandate that a certain level of wage is paid consistent with union contracts. And the question was, if the squad instead was the ultimate user and end user, if they would not have to pay prevailing wage. There was some suggestion by some of the members of the committee that could be as much as 25 to 33% savings in the overall cost of the project, which obviously would be enormous. So we will certainly work with village council to see if that's an opportunity, at which point then obviously it would be up to this board to make that determination, because effectively you deed the property and ownership of the, and whether I presume we could incorporate some deed restriction that only so long as it's used as a rescue squad.
And then if not, it would transfer back to the village.
Back.
My own concern is that we would have project manager for, if we do go that route, that we're all comfortable with, that is qualified and would really stay on task to make sure that we don't have the similar issues that we had with the firehouse?
Sure, no, but I think the way it's actually is constructed and the contract and all that would effectively be the same. It's really who's on the deed at the end of the day.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Next is our consent agenda.
Resolution 2013-295, a resolution authorizing change order number 1 for Stanzio Construction LLC for construction services for the Terrell Avenue Road improvements, Phase 1 from Scotland Road to Grove Road, representing a net decrease of $25,775.87 to the original contract amount. Resolution 2013-296, a resolution hiring seasonal staff for the 2013 to 2014 winter recreation programs in the Department of Recreation and Cultural Affairs. Resolution 2013-297, a resolution awarding a contract to Taramas Climate and Refrigeration LLC for HVAC repair and maintenance services for the 2014 calendar year. 2013-298, a resolution authorizing the cancellation of tax sale premiums. Resolution 2013-299, a resolution for appropriation transfers pursuant to NJSA 48:4-58. Resolution 2013-300, resolution appointing Christopher Battaglia as CFO and Village Treasurer. Resolution 2013-301, a resolution authorizing the 2014 annual meeting schedule for the Board of Trustees. Resolution 2013-302, resolution designating deputy custodians of public records. Resolution 2013-303, resolution appointing David Craker as an alternate member to the Environmental Commission. Resolution 2013-304, resolution appointing William Angelino as Commissioner to the South Orange Parking Authority. Resolution 2013-305, a resolution appointing Thurman McCoy as a Commissioner to the South Orange Parking Authority. Resolution 2013-306, resolution appointing Milton Westrich as a Commissioner to the South Orange Parking Authority. Resolution 2013-307, a resolution granting raffle license number 1242 to the Jefferson PTA for a casino night raffle.
Thank you. I just have a quick question for you guys. 2013-303, the resolution appointing an alternate member to the Environmental Commission. Is that alternate member done by resolution, whereas the other appointments are done by my declaration?
Yes.
Okay.
The regular appointments are yours and the alternates,
And the alternates are for
the
the board?
Yes.
I just want to make a comment about Resolution 2013-295. It gives me such joy and pleasure to see these type of resolutions. This is a change order representing a net decrease of $25,775 to the original contract amount for Terrell Avenue Road. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, this is like the third or fourth one this year that we've had go like this. Just south, I guess probably because the cost of competition's better, South's done been more accurate, but we've had, I think this is the third one this year, we've had a decrease in a road project.
And getting them early.
So,
Can we go over Resolution 300? Again, we covered it during the last meeting, but just for the public's benefit.
You'll recall at the last meeting, we approved an addendum to the Battaglia & Associates contract. For those in the public who may not be aware, South Orange has now for, I think it's 6 or 7 years, had a outsourced, if you will, contracted finance office through Battaglia & Associates. They are actually in our building, and they're there full-time. They do a fantastic job. In connection with the imminent expiration of the appointment and agreed term of a contract with the CFO, former administrator, we were looking at our options to replace the CFO position. The Finance Committee, under Trustee Levison's leadership, looked at a number of options, and the one that ultimately we recommended was to have an addendum to Battaglia & Associates, because they have certified municipal finance officers on staff, to provide that service and to provide the licensed professional. Because the New Jersey statutes require that an actual individual, licensed individual, be appointed as the CFO, That's what the effect of this resolution is. So it is to appoint Chris Battaglia, who is a licensed CFO, as the village's CFO. Under the addendum, it is provided for, this does provide a nominal salary of $5,000 that is specifically then deducted off of the addendum to the contract. So so this is just sort of carrying out the addendum that we approved at the last meeting.
And this would go through August 2014, and then we'd go out for RFP, or?
Well, that's correct. The contract, I mean, technically, the appointment is statutory, so the appointment is for the statutory term. Part of the thinking was by having the nominal salary, if as a result of the RFP process, we were to end up with a different finance company or change models, then certainly Mr. Battaglia would not perform all these duties for the nominal salary of $5,000. So.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any other questions or comments on any consent agenda? Okay, you have a motion? Moved by Trustee Davis Ford, seconded by Trustee Levison. Can we have the roll, please?
Yes. Trustee Collum?
Yes.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Clark?
Yes.
The consent agenda was approved.
Thank you. The next, excuse me, are two appointments that I'm making to the Environmental Commission. 2013-VP17, which is my appointment of Richard Bell as a regular member to the Environmental Commission, and 2013-VP18, which is my appointment of Robert Orgera as a regular member to the South Orange Environmental Commission. And so we congratulate both of them on their renewed appointments to the Environmental Commission. We know that the EC has done some great work in the past, and definitely wish them all the best as they continue to work with that group. Next is the approval of bills.
Yeah, I move that the bills list be approved that has been previously distributed to the board.
Okay, moved by Trustee Levison, seconded by Trustee Collum. We have the roll, please.
Trustee Davis Ford?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner?
Yes.
Trustee Levison?
Yes.
Trustee Rosner, thank you for your yes. Trustee Clark?
Yes.
Trustee Collum?
Yes.
The board approved the bills list.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to open the meeting up for any member of the public who wishes to speak for public comments. Is there anybody who wishes to speak? Okay.
You mean you're just sitting through this meeting for fun? Thank you.
I'm sorry, we can't do back and forth. If you'd like to make a comment, you can come to the microphone.
We never have an audience at this time.
Shannon's fault.
Everything's Shannon's fault.
We get that in the record.
It is in the record.
Now it is. Keep your voice down.
Ronald Regala, 302 Western Drive South, South Orange, New Jersey. I stayed maybe hoping that someone would finally describe what was passed in the first meeting with regard to this parking situation on Western Drive. Okay? Because everyone here passed this motion the first time around. So you should know what's included in here, right? What is included in here? I'm challenging all of you to give me the description as to what this means. Western Drive South, no parking situation.
In a nutshell.
Well, we can, hold on.
Not in a nutshell. I want to know what it is.
Okay, thank you. So unfortunately, there's not an opportunity for back and forth, but
We will when we close.
yeah, we'll certainly be able to respond to that. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak at this time?
What is the...
Okay, seeing as there are no more members of the public who wish to speak, I'd like to close public comments. Mr. Lewis?
Basically, coming from Rinda Road, if I recall correctly, the inner side of Western Drive, starting on Western Drive South, wrapping around most of the U, the inner side is no parking till you get about 350 feet from the other end, and then it switches to the other side, and what I guess you would consider the outer side becomes no parking.
But we didn't pass anything. We tabled it, to send out more information. So I think I heard that he asked what did we vote on or did we pass? We didn't vote on anything. It's still...
and we're going to be sending you a picture, but Mr. President, if I may respond to him, to describe it, given the unique loop nature of the western drives, and that the vast majority of drivers are heading west on their way home, it was suggested, with SOTAC conferring, that parking be prohibited on the south sides of both western drives. At the connecting segment at the crest, the south side parking ban of northwestern drive would continue around the inside of the loop to 25 feet, one space, west of the edge of the driveway of the second house from the top on southwestern drive. One more sentence. The parking ban on the south side of Southwestern Drive would extend downhill from the east edge of the two driveways opposite. Both bans would extend to the customary corner parking bans at the intersections with Renda and West End roads. So that's essentially what you get when you get a professional traffic engineer, is that they go through that level of detail to make sure that all the riders who are coming in and out of that neighborhood, if you're trying to address the concern, it's the best optimal scenario without wiping out just the inside loop or the outside loop. And with signage and with appropriate notice and a picture, it should be made a little easier for residents to understand what this recommendation was from a professional traffic engineer.
Thank you.
Definitely think the
So
picture
just
will
to
help.
restate, what you just read will be sent in writing with a diagram of exactly what you just explained.
Yes.
Trustee
So
Davis Ford will personally draw the diagram.
No.
And I will go and knock on each and every door.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one discussion item on tonight, which is Trustee Levison, you had a question about Third and Valley interim parking.
That's the question.
Yeah. I thought it was for closed.
Oh. Well, I guess it depends on what the question is, whether it's open or closed, but.
It was
if
contractual
it's,
issue.
yeah, then, okay.
It's crap, yeah, that's.
It was a contractual issue.
So then we'll
Going
address
into
that.
close, there is ongoing negotiations and hopefully getting finalized with Mr. Baumann and the property owner.
Yeah, thank you.
Which I wanted to just get an update on.
Okay, unless there's anything else.
Were the other two items that were originally listed for discussion pulled, or were those closed session also? You also submitted Village Hall and Rescue Squad. I know
Well,
Alex
those
covered Rescue
were,
Squad.
as far as I know.
We
addressed
talked about
earlier in
Rescue
the meeting.
Squad.
Village
Yeah.
Hall. Did you have anything with that?
Nothing.
No, I had raised the question of getting a status report for Village Hall.
Okay, gotcha.
And we will be putting one together, and I had hoped to have it sooner. Our project manager, his father passed away unexpectedly, and we were supposed to meet last week, and we're not able to. But he's back, and we'll get something put together and have him come to a meeting.
And I'd like to suggest that sometime, maybe in the second meeting of...
In January.
In January,
Have them
that
come
we
in.
have that person here to give a update to the status, the actual project manager, and I think that would be beneficial to all.
Well, I think we should establish a periodic plan of continuous updates on the progress of what we're doing with Village Hall. It's important.
Sorry, we were doing that in the conference agenda with Mr. Lewis's updates for, once a month. If there's, maybe we can put some more structure to that.
Yeah, and
so I'm writing ahead of
the
time.
asbestos is finally getting ready to start, and the rest of it's coming together, so there certainly will be more. We've kind of been in a holding pattern for a little while, but I agree, and as this really starts cranking up, that will.
So let me...
Mitch Fritz, we'll have him available, and maybe we can get on a schedule where how often he may or may not need to attend a meeting, but certainly get a more detailed, sort of comprehensive status report.
So may I suggest that, as the President stated, that you will give us a structured update once a month in our conference agenda, and then that once a quarter, we have a presentation from the project manager?
Certainly, I don't want to commit him, but I'll certainly ask him, and he's been more than willing, and I'm sure that won't be an issue. We may have to just work around his dates, but.
All right.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn.
I move
to adjourn again.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Adjourned. Good night and happy holidays.